Hello there. Welcome to Theology Thursday. I am Pastor Andrew. Today we continue with our discussion over the Gospel, in quotes, of Peter. If you recall, this was about 60 verses, 14 paragraphs of a fragment of text that ascribes the events surrounding Jesus' life, especially his trial, crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. It is only partially preserved in one manuscript that is dated to the 8th and 9th century, although most scholars believe that the actual composition date of the original Gospel of Peter was in the 150s to 200 AD. Now, this, of course, is not a text that belongs in the New Testament canon. It is not an accurate representation or description either of Christianity or of our Lord. Nevertheless, there are many times where we may encounter questions regarding these sort of texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas or of Mary, or in this case, the Gospel of Peter. It's very common today to think that the church somehow suppressed or repressed these sorts of works, and that's simply not the case. These writings were never considered for the New Testament canon, mainly because of the numerous errors that there were within them. That and the fact that Peter simply did not write these particular words that are inscribed to him. So, long and short of it, it was not included in our New Testament. Nevertheless, it's important to know some of the reasons why the Gospel of Peter was not included in the New Testament canon. Last week we talked a little about the background and introduced the Gospel of Peter and how it came about to be and how it was discovered. And today we're going to talk about some of the errors, some of the reasons why the Gospel of Peter was rejected by those early Christians as not an authentic work. All right. So the first one basically comes to us in the details of those events leading up to Jesus' crucifixion. Paragraph 7 through verse 11 in the Gospel of Peter gives a confession of the Jewish authorities' guilt. This simply lacks historical credibility. The confession of the Jewish authorities makes more sense in a context after 70 AD, where those in Jewish leadership were blamed for the destruction of Jerusalem as a result of not accepting Jesus or not looking at Jesus or not viewing Jesus as the Messiah. Furthermore, the reference of the Jewish scribes and elders saying, "For it is better, say they, for us to be guilty of the greatest sin before God and not fall into the hands of the people, the Jews, and be stoned," likewise reflects a certain mentality that was evident after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD and is simply cannot be dated or a part of the synoptic gospels that were all written prior to the fall, in their early dates prior to the fall of Jerusalem. So, in other words, there is some clear cultural indications within the text that would date it after the fall of Jerusalem and therefore put it back even later in the timeline from other gospels which are sooner, composed sooner to the point of Jesus's ascension. Okay. There's also some strange things that would be culturally inaccurate. The Gospel of Peter, according to paragraphs 8 and 10, refer to the high priest spending the night in the cemetery. Now, this is just crazy. No priest, especially the high priest, would do that. There were all sorts of ceremonial laws that this would violate, especially on a day that was as holy as the Passover. It's just not conceivable that priest or even the high priest would set up camp and keep an eye on Jesus's tomb That's just not something that would happen. And so this is another glaring historical blunder and inaccuracy. Finally, there is the embellishments of the resurrection accounts, and there are numerous embellishments. And what I mean by embellishments is things that are so far from reality that they certainly can be tossed aside as simply just crazy. Historically speaking, regarding the tomb, we know that there was a seal placed on it. In the Gospel of Peter, it indicates that there were 7 seals placed over the tomb. And a great multitude of people from the towns surrounding Jerusalem came to see the sealing of the tomb. Again, this is simply not plausible. And in the sense that they are embellishments. There would not have been this many people on such a holy time. Although there were a lot of people in Jerusalem, they would not have traveled to see this particular event. The body of Jesus was brought down and buried rather quickly. There simply would not have been the time for people to come and observe him being put into the tomb, except for those who were there, the actual eyewitnesses. The other thing is the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke. The New Testament writers never exactly describe how the resurrection took place, presumably since no one was there to witness it, other than the guards, right? And in the Gospel according to St. Peter, or the Gospel according to Peter, it actually describes the events right at the resurrection of Jesus. We know this, and we know the account of the resurrection to be his followers visit the tomb is empty, and then they encounter their Lord risen and in complete wholeness, the tomb stone being rolled away. We know these events from eyewitnesses. The Gospel of Peter describes the resurrection of Jesus this way. And in the night in which the Lord's day was drawing on, as the soldiers kept guard 2 by 2 in watch, there was a great voice in heaven, and they saw the heavens open, and 2 men descended from thence with great light and approached the tomb. And that stone which was put at the door rolled of itself and made way in part, and the tomb was opened, and both of the young men entered in. And when therefore the soldiers saw it, they awakened the centurion and the elders, for they were two being keeping a guard. And as they declared what things they had seen, again came 3 men from the tomb, and 2 of them supporting one, and a cross was following them. And of the 2, the head reached into heaven. So these 2 individuals coming out of the tomb are giants. Their heads are in heaven. But the head of him who was led by them overpassed the heavens. So obviously he's going beyond the other 2. And they heard a voice from the heavens saying, "Thou hast preached to them that sleep." And a response was heard from the cross. The cross spoke and said, "Yea." Of course, there's just some serious problems here with this, mainly from a historical standpoint, the idea that the guards being asleep. This was not something that was taken very kindly by the Romans, the Roman army and Roman centurions, nevertheless, would not have fallen asleep on watch and expected to live. So this is a very serious historical inaccuracy here, besides the fact that it's talking about literally a talking cross. A little strange, okay? Again, this sort of embellishment of the resurrection, when you compare it to, let's say, I don't know, any of the apostles' accounts of it, right, is clearly not to be taken seriously. It is probably maybe if the Gospel of Peter is to be considered a Gnostic text, it is written to kind of quote unquote fill in the gaps of the events surrounding Jesus's life, but yet how it was done so just simply invalidates the text as being accurate. So In conclusion, the historical errors and embellishments, the 7 seals being used to seal the tomb of Jesus, the crowd from Jerusalem that comes to see the sealed tomb, the Jewish high priests that camp out in the graveyard or next to the tomb overnight, the Jewish leaders that fear harm of the Jewish people, and the resurrection story that actually describes how Jesus exited the tomb with 2 giant angels and a talking cross with a supersized Jesus. Just simply historical errors and embellishments. Okay. Long and short of it, it is simply not a text to be taken seriously. If you wish to read it, by all means, but it is not a text that we should base our faith upon, and is certainly not a text that should be involved and included in the historical documents such as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that are included in our New Testament. Thank you for joining me today on Theology Thursday. I look forward to another discussion with you next week.